All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Mosconi. I'm one of the staff members here at Indigenous Education Incorporated. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce Jay Rosner from the Princeton Review Foundation. So he will be kind of walking us through the LSAT and how best to prepare for that. So without further ado, Jay, it's all yours.
Thank you. And can you hear me?
Yeah, you're all set to go.
Excellent. Well, we're going to be talking about the LSAT this evening. I'm going to try to spend the next 45, 50 minutes or so giving you the best possible information that I can give you around your getting your best LSAT score. I hope to provide you with real solid tips and suggestions for unmasking the LSAT. Again, the goal, the mantra, is that you get your best LSAT score. So let's start with just a review. Most or all of you were on the webinar last week. I just want to review the 5 or 6 most important slides. What does the LSAT actually measure? And here's my opinion of what the LSAT actually measures. Does it measure how intelligent you are? I say no. Does it measure how well you'll do? I say in graduate or professional school. Actually, in this case, does it measure how well you'll do in law school? The answer is no. The LSAT helps a little bit in predicting first-year GPA in law school, but that's all. And if you recall, I said that's something. It's just not very much. So when you think about connecting the LSAT and whether you'll be successful in law school, those things really, really aren't very tightly connected. Does the LSAT actually measure how good you are at the LSAT? The answer is yes. That's what it measures. That's all it measures. So if you have a great LSAT score, it means you're good at the LSAT. If you don't, you can take steps, and that's the preparation we'll be talking about to improve your score. So had a couple of survey questions here, and can we pop up the first polling question, please?
Yeah, just hang tight, and we're going to give you a few seconds to kind of go through all these. Look on the right side of your screen, and that's where you'll find your polling questions. We'll give you about another 10 to 15 seconds to go ahead and answer these. All right, well, as of right now, oh, just disappeared. But we're looking at it, as far as what I saw, we're at 100% college graduates.
Okay. Thank you. The next slide, next point on the slide, I think is also connected to a polling question. Yes, who took an official LSAT? Can we have the second polling question, please, so I can see if anyone's taken the official LSAT?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
All right, the poll is live on your right-hand side of your screen here. Give you about 10 to 15 more seconds to answer. Okay, have you previously taken an official LSAT? We have 50% saying yes once, and the other 50% saying no, I have not taken the LSAT.
Okay, so we have half and half. That's helpful for me to know. And the next point on the slide, have a polling question connected to that. Oh, and then I'll talk about Becky afterwards, which you'll really want to hear. But let's do the other polling question. Okay, can we get that? Oh, we have that polling question.
Yes. Are you able to explain affirmative action and how it affects Native students? So I'll give you a few seconds here to answer that poll. Give you about 10 more seconds here. All right, we're looking at 100% saying no, I cannot.
Okay, let me just take a minute or two here to talk about affirmative action. Affirmative action, or it's sometimes called race-conscious admissions, allows an admissions office to consider and accept a Native American student or another underrepresented student, African American, Latino student, but a Native American student with slightly lower grades and slightly lower test scores than other students. And that's an important mechanism to allow us to diversify schools, law schools in particular, and to provide a little better chance for Native American students to get into law school. Now, notice the word little. It's a little better chance. It's not a lot better chance. So applying affirmative action affirmative action applied by a law school admissions office will give you a little better chance to get in than you otherwise ordinarily would have. Now, that doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't get your best LSAT score. You should. Make it easy for the admissions office to accept you. Maybe they don't have to give you a little better chance. Maybe they could give some other Native student a little better chance because you don't need a little better chance on your LSAT score. That would be the position to try to be in. Now, affirmative action is used by schools in 42 states. It's only not used by state universities in the 8 states that have banned affirmative action. And so that's something that, I mean, what I just said is a basic understanding of affirmative action, race-conscious admissions, that you should understand and you should be able to explain to somebody if they ask you, well, what's affirmative action about? It gives underrepresented students a little bit of a break, not much, in admissions, and it's used to try to get more Native students and underrepresented students into places like law schools. Law schools want to be more diverse. Now, this story that involves Becky is the main affirmative action case that was just decided was Fisher versus the University of Texas. And Abigail Fisher was a young white woman who actually had 2 shots to get into the University of Texas. This was an undergraduate case, but applies to law schools. Abigail Fisher sued, charging that the University of Texas discriminated against her because she's white. You know, a pretty crazy claim on its face, but the court took it seriously, and the court decided that no, Abigail Fisher wasn't discriminated against, that the University of Texas could use race-conscious admissions, could use affirmative action, and could use its process to give a slight advantage to underrepresented minority students like Native American students. Where Becky comes in is, here's a young white woman who could have qualified for admission to the University of Texas if she got in the top 10% of her high school graduating class. Texas has a process where if you finish in the top 10% of your high school graduating class by your grades, you're automatically admitted to the University of Texas. She did not finish into the top 10%. There was another way she could have gotten in. She didn't get in that way, so she sued. So people who were poking fun at her for, first of all, claiming that she was discriminated against because she was white, and secondly, for losing her case, started referring to her as Becky with the bad grades. You all know the reference. Because had she just gotten better grades, she would have gotten in. Why is she whining and complaining? So here's this young white woman who thought she was being smart, loses her case, and now has to live, thought she was being smart, claiming discrimination against herself because she's white, now has to live the rest of her life being known as Becky with the bad grades. I think it's well-deserved. She shouldn't have brought the case in the first place. And it's well-deserved that she has kind of a humorous and derogatory nickname going forward. That's a little story about affirmative action. We can go on. So this is, again, review how much LSAT prep is recommended by Jay, and you can put up this whole slide because folks should remember from last week that we're talking to 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 to 6 days per week for 7 to 8 weeks, right up to the test, 4 to 5 practice tests, not more than 1 per week. You don't want to get lower than your best score. You want to do that. You don't want to do a lot more than that because you don't want to burn out. Remember, it's equivalent to the performance for an artistic performance. It's equivalent. I'm sorry. It's equivalent to rehearsal for an artistic performance. It's equivalent of training and practice for an athletic performance, a game, a match, whatsoever. And it's a little bit more than a half season of a high school sport. So as I said, it's a serious commitment of time. You need to do it to get your best score, and it's not going to kill anybody. Here's the wonderful medicine wheel that Frank Edwagishik allows me to use, encourages me to use with Native students, and wants me to emphasize, if you recall, that his tribe has seeking balance as actually the most important concept on this page. That's why they put it on the top, and that the 4 elements in bold are important elements to keep in mind. You want to optimize your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual situation to go in and get your best score. So again, another quick review, and we can put this whole slide up. The acronym PACES, P for plan, A for acting on your plan, C for confidence and calmness, E for energized, ready to do the time, and S for safety and security. You have a backup, but you'd rather not use it. If you can walk in to the official test saying all these things honestly, you're just putting yourself in the sweet spot to get your best score. So please put yourself in the sweet spot. Please do your test prep plan, carry out the plan. Please get yourself energized, and please have that backup test date selected so that you can go in feeling comfortable, ready, and fully prepared to get your best score. We can go to scheduling an official LSAT. Now, the wrong question is, on which date should I schedule the official LSAT? The correct question is, which 7 to 8 week period works best for test preparation? A little hint, you want a 7 to 8 week period with the fewest conflicting obligations and distractions, allowing the most time and energy for your test prep. Then you want to register early for the test, which will be at the end of your test prep period. And I know you're all college graduates, so you're a little beyond this, but the best way to do this, if you happen to know any undergraduates who are heading toward law school, the best way to do this is take a heavy course load in the fall of your junior year and a light course load in the spring of your junior year, and prep and take the LSAT in the spring of the junior year. That works out best. Too late for you, not too late for people following you. Now, remember, you're looking for the 8 week period before the test as the best time for you to prepare. But with the LSAT, unfortunately, since it's still in pencil and paper, you're stuck with only 4 test dates a year. And these are the next 4 test dates. The test is almost always the first Saturday in December. It's in early February, it's in mid-June, and it's in mid or late September. And these are the specific dates for the next 4. Notice that the June test always starts at 12:30. It's an afternoon test. I don't know why. I can't tell you why. Just the way it is. And the other 3 tests start at 8:30 in the morning. So your question, if you're going to take the LSAT within the next year, is which of these 4 dates involves an 8-week period before that date that's relatively flexible for me to do my LSAT prep? And if you're the kind of person who says all of those periods are terrible, then you have to pick the least worst one, and you should, to do this. So that's the choice is very specific for the LSAT. You're only working with those 4 test dates. Got to pick one and go for it. So here's a little quote, and I'll give you a moment to read the quote, and then I'll tell you who said it. Or maybe if somebody can, through the chat room, can tell us who said this quote, that I would like to see somebody recognize it.
One of our staff members knows, but as of right now, we're going to wait a few more seconds and see if anyone else can recognize it. If that wasn't a hint.
A pretty prominent person, actually.
Hint, hint.
Anybody attending the webinar know this?
Other than Milani?
Other than Milani. Okay, Milani, you can let everybody know. Milani, are you there?
She's got her microphone off, but I believe she's typing.
Okay.
Adding to the suspense.
Yes, the suspense is building. Who is this? A woman taking the LSAT in the Vietnam War era. Who could that possibly be?
Ms. Hillary Clinton?
Indeed. This is a quote from Hillary Clinton. Now, she obviously had a terrible time with being hassled at the LSAT. You have other issues. You want to do your best on the test. You won't have people yelling at you that they'll have to go to Vietnam if you take the test. So this is not to worry you. This is to show you some different worries that different people had in the past. And she certainly overcame whatever issues she faced that day because she went to Yale Law School, and we hope she will be our president, those of us who care about those things. But let's move on. How to best use your practice tests. You want to take practice LSAT tests about once every 10 days to 2 weeks. And let me tell you how you want to do it and where you want to do it. It's best if you happen to be in a situation where you can take an LSAT practice test in pencil and paper, and you always take them in pencil and paper, never on the computer, because the LSAT is given in pencil and paper. If there's a group LSAT practice test event, you want to get in on that. And if you can't find a group to take a practice LSAT test in, then what you want to do is go to kind of a quiet corner in a library. You want to be in a slightly unfamiliar place, because when you're taking the LSAT, you're going to be in a place that's not familiar to you. You're going to be in some classroom or gym or some room somewhere. It will be quiet, but it won't be silent. There'll be a proctor walking around. So if you put yourself in a quiet corner of a library where it's a little uncomfortable, it's not your desk or your kitchen table, and it's quiet, but it's not silent, people are walking around back across the room someplace, you're putting yourself in a situation that's that is as close as you can get to the real LSAT. Obviously, you want to time yourself very carefully, but that's how and where to take practice tests. After the practice test, you want to carefully, once every 10 days to 2 weeks. Why? Well, taking it more often than that doesn't allow you to do the first thing that I say here, to carefully analyze and work on weaknesses and strengths between practice tests. And if you do it any less than that, less than 10 days to 2 weeks, then you don't have the second element here. You don't have the regular exposure to building stamina, practicing pacing, and getting a full test checkup. You can always afford to spend 5, 10, 15 seconds to refocus, to skip questions. And more important than a practice score is the number of correct and incorrect answers you get on various question types. Let me just briefly tell you my own refocusing technique, and you should develop a refocusing technique that you can use that works well for you on the official test, and you develop that in your practice tests. So when I say a refocusing technique, this is the way it comes up for me and for most people. You read it, you're at the test, you read a sentence once, you read it a second time, you read it a third time, you tell yourself, that is not going into my brain. I don't know what I'm reading. Your mind is wandering, you're thinking about something else, you're not focused, you're distracted, whatever. You should have a technique to refocus. And here's my refocusing technique. That happens to me. I take a deep breath and I close my eyes, and I try to just clear out my mind. And I know that when I open my eyes in 7 or 8 or 9 seconds, I'm going to be looking at that sentence, and I want it to go into my head. And 95% of the time it does. So that's a good refocusing technique that I've developed. Develop your own. It has to be quiet because you're at the official test, and you have to be able to do it seated because you can't get up and do jumping jacks or anything. So develop a quiet, seated method for you to refocus yourself so that when you refocus, whatever you're looking at will go into your head. Okay, we can go to the next slide. What are the first steps in beginning to think about taking the last? It's not the last, it's the LSAT. I mistyped. Apologize for that. Might be the last test you ever take, but actually if you're going to law school, it won't be, because you'll be taking a bar exam. So it's not your last test. If you're thinking about taking the LSAT, you're not serious until you take a practice test under test conditions, which means you carefully time yourself. You need to score it and analyze it, see your strengths and weaknesses, use the results to inform your decisions, and develop a test prep plan that fits your needs. LSAT scores are good for 5 years. So why wait? I've run across too many students, too many native students who've told me, I was going to take the LSAT in 2011, and then I thought I might take it in 2012, and then some stuff came up, and I was going to, that's an avoidance cycle. You name it, deal with it, pick an 8-week period before a test, sign up for the test, prepare for it, and do it. That's the only way to break an avoidance cycle. And if you get a great test score, it doesn't mean that you have to go to law school. You can do some other stuff for a couple of years and then go to law school. Scores are good for 5 years. Here's I use analogies to athletics because folks understand athletics and folks don't understand testing. So here's an athletic analogy. Let's say you had to do an important mile run. And for those of you who are not runners, a mile would be pretty challenging. I happen to jog 5 miles pretty regularly. So if I think of 10 miles, that would be challenging for me. So if I had a challenging 10-mile run, and if you had a challenging run, whether it's a mile or whatever the distance would be, how would you think about it? Well, one of the things you would think about is, well, what long-term prep and short-term prep should I do for my run, or should I do for the test? and you'd have a training program to build your strength and skills and your stamina, because you're picking a challenging distance to run. And the test is a physical experience, as I explained previously, and you need to do intensive prep to prepare and rehearse and train and practice for your performance on the LSAT if you want to get your best score. And that's the whole point of this webinar, giving you tips and suggestions for how to get your best score. Some folks say do no short-term test prep. Somebody will come up to you and say, you know, I don't know, just go in and take the LSAT. Well, that's completely crazy. If you want to get your best score, if you want to take the LSAT and give them some money, do it. If you want to get your best score, don't do that. Do the short-term 8-week prep that I'm talking about to get your best score. Now, you want to peak performance without burning out. More is not always better. You remember my visual on that. You want to work hard, but don't obsess. And there are different approaches to a test, or I guess a run, but mostly a test. I'm a very relaxed, laid-back guy. But when I get into the test, I'm a test-taking machine. I am intense. I am proactive. I'm getting as many questions correct as I can in a short period of time that you have. So whatever this is not, test taking is not a laid back experience. If you want to get your best score, you want to draw out of yourself whatever proactivity you have and be proactive on the test. Go after it. You have to get as many questions as you can get correctly in a short period of time. That kind of intensity and proactivity gets you your best score. Our next slide, what is preparing intensively long term? Now, this only applies if you have way more than 8 weeks to prep for the test. If you're 6 months out from the LSAT, there is something specific you can do. And that is, you can do a reading review that will help you build your strength of reading. The LSAT is predominantly a reading test. It's got one weird section, I call it weird, one section with unusual questions called games, and I'll actually do a few games questions before the end of this webinar. But other than games, the other parts of the LSAT involve your strength of reading, and obviously if you have your reading comprehension, and obviously if you have a good vocabulary, that's helpful, because if you encounter words that you don't know on the LSAT, it's going to be harder for you to answer questions correctly. So the reading review that I'm suggesting here, these things are done before your 8-week prep period, because the benefit of what I'm about to tell you here doesn't really accumulate unless you spend 3, 4, 5, 6 months doing this stuff, mostly 4, 5, 6 months doing this stuff. And the reading review involves daily practice. The LSAT sections are typically 35 minutes long. So you want to spend 35, 45 minutes in intensive reading of material that's comparable to and similar to LSAT reading comprehension passages. And those things would be New York Times editorials, although the editorials are sometimes longer than LSAT passages, or the op-eds. The op-eds are the articles that are across on the page opposite the editorial, typically 4 or 5 articles, which are usually just a little bit longer than LSAT reading comp passages, and are on a variety of humanities type topics. Although right now they're mostly on Donald Trump, but excuse me. Moving forward a couple of weeks, they won't be. They'll be on a variety of topics. And if you sit there with a dictionary looking up the words you don't know, you will build your strength of reading. You want to read these things for comprehension, being able to explain and summarize them to somebody else with that level of intensity. and you want to look up the words that you don't know to learn some vocabulary words. That would be great practice if you can do that for months before the LSAT. You don't have to do it, but it will build your strength of reading over time. Another good source specifically for vocabulary is the book Word Smart, which just is chock full of vocabulary words that are used on these tests. And that could be helpful to you. Okay, next slide. There are many things you can control and a few you can't. You can determine to a great extent lots of things. For example, these 4 or 5 things right here. You have a lot of control. Perhaps the one you have least control over in that list is your work and family. You don't have, many people don't have a lot of control over their work. But your family, you have some control. Your friends, you have a lot of control over the time you spend with your friends during your test prep period. If you have a really good friend and you say to that friend, look, I'm preparing for the LSAT, we can't get together for the next month until the test is over. If that friend is a good friend, they'll be your friend. They'll really understand. They'll be supportive of you in that process. So control the things you can control. How much you prep, when and where you take the test, the snacks you have, the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual condition going into the test. Control that stuff. That's within your control. What you can't control is exactly which questions appear on the screen, but if you're well prepped, you'll be ready for them. So don't self-sabotage. Seize control of the many, many things you can control and put in your best effort to get your best score. The moral is control as much as you can. Now, here's a pragmatic suggestion. An LSAT prep course that you take in 7 to 8 weeks, or if you're self-prepping, the prepping you do yourself is a cramming experience. You want to strive for some balance, but you must hit the ground running from day one. It's not like a college course where you can kind of, if you're thinking, oh, it's 8 weeks, well, I'll just sort of do light duty for 4 or 5, 6 weeks and really kick in the last couple of weeks. That will end up being a 3-week test prep, not an 8-week test prep. You can't, this is a cram situation. You can't cram the cram situation. So you really need to do 7 to 8 weeks of full prep, prepping hard from day one. Now, your LSAT prep plan should make sense with good reasons for everything you do. This is primarily a rational universe. And if somebody says to you, you should try this in your LSAT prep, first question you should ask is why? And if they can't answer that question, if they say something like, well, somebody else told me that that's what they did, that's not a particularly good reason. One of the things that you can do is you can email me if you have any questions about whether you're getting a good suggestion or not, and I'll tell you whether it's a good suggestion or not. There are a lot of well-intentioned people who will give you bad advice. Let's go to the next slide. And, we have some LSAT games questions. Okay. So can you go back to the previous slide? Can you reverse me here? Okay, because I just wanted to say one other thing before everybody gets totally consumed at reading the LSAT game question. And that is, I want to reemphasize that there are well-intentioned people who will give you bad advice, not because they want to hurt you, but they want to help you, but they just don't know. There's a lot of bad advice floating around. So if you hear something from someone and you're not sure about it, email me and ask me if it's good advice, and I'll tell you whether it is or it isn't. And I have to say that more than half the time that people email me that stuff, it's bad advice. So there's just too much of that floating around out there. Don't get bad advice, follow it, and then not get your best score as a result. Be skeptical of advice that sounds to you that it might not be right. Okay, let's go to a few LSAT questions. This is the game. Welcome to the games section. This is the section where the questions are a little unusual, a little weird. You've probably never seen them before. There's an argument that the defenders of the test make that These are the skills. This is testing skills that are important for a lawyer to have. I've been a lawyer. I practiced law. These questions don't test skills that a lawyer needs to have, but they're on the test and they're important. And you know I'm a critic of the test, and I'm a critic that they have these questions. And you can criticize them too, but that's not your task. Your primary task is to get your best score. And so what you want to do is to learn how to do these questions quickly, efficiently, effectively, getting the right answer. So this is actually not a question. This is the setup for a series of questions. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the method that's most helpful in having you get the correct answer to an LSAT Games question. And that method is to draw a good diagram. Do a good diagrammatic representation of what the question is asking. Now, there are a few folks, a small percentage of folks out there can do these questions well without drawing a diagram. I'm a great test taker. I can't do it. I need to draw a good diagram to be fast and accurate. Now, I could do these questions without diagrams, but I'd be very, very slow at it. And speed is at a priority. In the LSAT, you want to move quickly, getting as many correct answers as you can. So I'll stop talking here for a few seconds and let you read this, even though you've been reading it instead of listening to me, and you should have been listening to me. But now you can read it. Okay, so there are three conditions here. The first condition is the codes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And notice these folks are a little sneaky. They could have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would have been a little easier to understand. But they do the 5 digits starting with 0 just to make it a little trickier for you. You have to be a little more careful so that you don't make a careless error. So the codes use those 5 digits and no others. Each digit occurs exactly once in any code. The second digit has a value exactly twice that of the first digit, and the value of the third digit is less than the value of the fifth digit. Well, once I say the second digit has a value exactly twice that of the first digit, there are only 2 possibilities for the first 2 digits. The only 2 possibilities are 1 and 2 and 2 and 4. So if we click, if we do some clicks here, we'll pull the 1 and 2 and 2 and 4 up there. Okay, those are because of the second condition. See, I'm drawing my diagram now to answer the questions. I haven't even looked at the questions yet, but I want to represent the setup in a diagram that will help me answer the questions correctly and quickly. So those are the only 2 possibilities with the second condition. Now the third condition, let me show you how I represent the third condition. And if we click here, you'll see that the third condition, the value of the third digit is less than the value of the fifth digit. Well, the only 2 possibilities for the third digit in the first alignment is 0 or 3. Remember, we only have 0, 3, 4 left because we've got 1 and 2 already. So the third digit is either 0 or 3, because if the third digit were 4, it wouldn't be less than the fifth digit, because 4 is the highest digit. So 0 or 3 are the only 2 possibilities for the third digit. And I put 4 in parentheses over on the right because it's likely that that's going to be the fifth digit, since that's got to be more than the third digit, but it's not guaranteed. So I represent that. This is my representation. I represent that in parentheses. It's likely to be 4, but doesn't have to be 4. Got it? Okay, let's look at the second possibility where 2 and 4. Whoa, back up, back up. We're getting to the question. I want to explain the second possibility, and then we'll look at the question. Second possibility, since we've already used 2 and 4, the third digit can be 0 or 1. It can't be 3, because if it were 3, that wouldn't fulfill the third condition, that the third digit is less than the value of the fifth digit, right? Because the fifth digit has to be greater than the third digit. So 3 can't be in the third position. 3 is likely to be in the fifth position, but doesn't have to be. That's why I put in parentheses. And then I put a little note at the bottom, less than the fifth, because since the third position is less than the fifth, I wanted to remind myself of that, because I'm not going, when I go to do these questions, I'm not going to read all the words above. I'm just going to look at my diagram, because I don't want to be rereading those words over and over again. I want to see a diagrammatic, simple, clear representation. So let me go through the possibilities with you here before we go to the first question. So since the second digit has a value exactly twice that of the first digit, there are only 2 possibilities, starting with 1 and 2 and 2 and 4. And once we have those 2 possibilities and we take into consideration the value of the third digit being less than the value of the fifth digit, we could have 1, 2, 0, 3, 4 up there. We could have 1, 2, 0, 4, 3. Because in each of those, the third digit is less than the fifth digit. And we could have 1, 2, 3, 0, 4, because then 3 is less than 4. So those are all the possibilities of the first alignment. The second alignment, we could have 2, 4, 0, 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 0, 3, or 2, 4, 0, 3, 1, because 0 would be less than 1. So the 3 is likely to be in the last position, but doesn't have to be. So I just named for you all the possibilities. And if I have a sense of that, and if I can get that relatively quickly, and I can by my diagram, it took me 5 minutes to explain it to you. I actually did it in like 20 to 30 seconds. But I wanted to explain to you how I did it. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. We're ready for the first question. So here's the first question. If the last digit of an acceptable product code is 1, it must be true that the first digit is 2. Must that be true? Well, under what conditions would we have a 1 in the last position? We can't in the first alignment, so we're not even looking at that. We're looking at the second alignment. And if you recall, we could have a 1 in the last position if we had a 0 in the third position and a 3 in the fourth position. So that's the only way that that can be true. And so my answer choices is the first digit is 2. That's correct. If I look at that's the correct answer. If I look at the second answer choice, the second digit is 0. Well, the second digit is never 0. That answer is always false. So anybody who picks that answer has no comprehension of what's going on here. The third digit is 3. Well, if the third digit is 3, we know that it can only occur in the first alignment, and then the first digit is 1, not the last digit is 1. So that's not a correct answer. D, the fourth digit is 4. Well, the only place where the fourth digit is 4 is in the first alignment, and the first digit is 1, not the last digit, so that's wrong. And E, the fourth digit is 0. That could occur in, let me see, the fourth digit is 0. That can occur in either alignment. So if we look at the second alignment and the fourth digit is 0, the third digit would have to be 1 and the fifth digit would have to be 3. If we look at the first alignment, if the fourth digit is 0, the third digit. Well, the first we don't even have to look at because 1 can't be the 5th digit. It's always the first digit. So I think you could see here that the first answer is correct. And I would have gotten that and just moved on, gotten that in 5 or 10 seconds off my diagram. I wouldn't have bothered to look at the rest of them. But I've pointed out to you that B is always wrong, and I've shown you why C, D, and E are wrong. Let's go to the second question. And notice I've got my diagram down there because I'm using the same diagram. I think there are either 6 or 8 questions in this question set. I won't have time to do them all. I'm just going to do a couple. Which one of the following must be true about any acceptable product code? So, if it's an acceptable product code, this must be true. So, let's look at the first one. The digit 1 appears in some position before the digit 2. Well, it does in the first alignment, but it doesn't in the second alignment. 1 can't appear before digit 2 because digit 2 is the first digit. So it can appear in the first alignment. Let's look at answer B. The digit 1 appears in some position before the digit 3. Well, it certainly does in the first alignment. In the second alignment, is it that it must be true that 1 appears before the digit 3? No, because we could have 0, 1, 3 as an acceptable second code. So that's clearly wrong. C, the digit 2 appears in some position before the digit 3. Well, that occurs in the first alignment, and that occurs in the second alignment. That's the correct answer. Let's look at D and E just to make sure. The digit 3 appears in some position before the digit 0. No, in the first alignment it could be 0, 3, 4. And in E, the digit 4 appears in some position before the digit 3. Well, that occurs in the second alignment, but in the first alignment, you could have 0, 3, 4. So it's not before 3. So we got the correct answer to that one. And I would, in my test taking, I would stop once I got the correct answer because I knew it was the correct answer and I wouldn't check any further. But if I had extra time, I might go back and just make sure that I didn't make a mistake. And it may seem to you like it took a long time for me to do that, but that's only because I'm describing it to you. Once I have my diagram, these questions take 15 or 20 seconds. It's maybe 25 seconds. It goes quickly. Now, it's very, very important to set up your diagram accurately and to make it useful. And that's what test prep is about. Test prep on the game section is learning how to quickly draw an accurate, useful diagram that will help you answer the question quickly and accurately. Now, how does that relate to law practice or law school? Not at all. You will never see any question like this in law school. So try to approach this with a sense of humor. It's a weird, kind of stupid section. You just have to learn how to do well on it to have your best chance to get into law school. I'm sorry about that. I apologize to you on behalf of the law schools and the LSAT. That's just the way it is. Just deal with it. You have no choice. If you're going to law school, this is what you need to do. Next slide. I already have mentioned this to you, but I'll just reinforce it. There's a lot of misinformation floating around about all the grad tests, including the LSAT. Be careful. Even well-intentioned tips can be wrong. Just email me with what you've heard, and I'll tell you whether it's something that you should pay attention to or ignore. Everything you do in LSAT prep should make sense with good reasoning to support it. Okay? And finally, if you want to type in a little question, type in, oh, I have GRE there. I should be LSAT. I'm sorry. I apologize. I transferred this slide from my GRE presentation because it's the same concepts, and I didn't plug in LSAT. What have you heard about the LSAT? Not the GRE. What have you heard about the LSAT that you're not sure about? Might sound a little weird. You're just unclear as to whether it's good advice or not. I think we're at the Q&A time.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, any questions or anybody who wants to volunteer something that they've heard about the LSAT, not the GRE, but the LSAT, that they think may or may not be good advice?
Don't be shy. Feel free to post it out there on our chat box.
So any questions?
As of right now, we're not getting any questions.
Okay. Everybody is still thinking about the Hillary Clinton quote, I think.
Probably. Or Becky.
Or Becky
and her bad grades.
Right. Or they've taken screenshots of the games questions and are still trying to figure them out, even though I explained them.
Have to admit, I was playing along too, so don't worry. Don't feel ashamed.
Okay. Yeah, those questions, if they seem to you like, oh my goodness, I'll never be able to do that, you will. You just have to spend time doing them and learning the techniques for doing good diagrams. There are techniques in any test prep program. If you buy a book, a good book will outline the different types of diagrams that you need to learn to draw for different kinds of games questions. And your job is to do the kind of practice where you get good and fast at drawing really good diagrams. And nobody's born with that. You really just have to learn it. I had to learn it. I had to practice it before I took the LSAT and before I taught the LSAT.
All right, we have a comment from one of our attendees. Elizabeth, would you be able to elaborate a little bit more? She says, studying questions and breaking down each one individually.
Well, let me just comment so far. Certainly you have to study different kinds of LSAT questions. That's what test prep involves. And certainly you have to break them down so that you understand what they're asking, how you get the answer, and if you answered a question incorrectly, why you got an incorrect answer. So those are all important things to do. Did the person elaborate on the question?
She's wondering how you can pick apart a question to help you answer it.
Well, the general answer, I mean, there are 15 or 20 different question types on the LSAT. There are half a dozen to a dozen different games kinds of questions. So there are dozens of answers to that question. It depends on what kind of question you're asking about. And generally, that's what you're learning how to do in test prep. If I could tell you how to do that in 30 seconds here, and you could do it, you wouldn't need to prep for 8 weeks. Unfortunately, you have to learn how to do that on each of the question types by learning the methods and techniques, and that takes 8 weeks. So there's nothing I can tell you beyond that that will answer your question and be helpful. You need to learn how to do that, do it well, do it quickly for all the question types to get the correct answer quickly and safely, and then move on.
Wonderful. We don't have any other questions at the moment, so people feel free to send in your questions if you've got them. We've got Jay on the line for a little bit longer. I don't have any questions. I mean, I'm not studying to be a lawyer, but
Would you please change GRE to LSAT when you get a chance in that last slide, because that could really confuse some folks.
Of course.
Thank you.
Well, if you're thinking of questions, I'll kind of advance the slides to our contact information. So if you've got any other questions that may or may not be pertinent to what you're seeing here today regarding the LSAT, feel free to email us at scholarships@cobellscholar.org or visit our website at cobellscholar.org. We also have our phone numbers down there. We have office hours from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And like on the previous slide, I'll go back just real quick. Jay's email is jr@review.com. Please feel free to email him with any questions or myths that could be debunked, and he would be more than happy to help you out as well.
Thank you. Let me just, my parting comments would be, take a practice LSAT within the next week. Why not? Even if you're taking the LSAT a year or two from now. Find out your strengths and weaknesses now. Why not? Take a practice LSAT. Figure out which, you have the 4 test dates, and if you didn't write them down, just go to the LSAC website, find the 4 test dates. Just Google LSAT test dates. You get a bunch of sites that'll tell you the dates. Figure out which 8-week period before which test is best for you to prepare. Figure out, so you have your practice test, strengths and weaknesses, you have your 8-week period, you know when you're going to take the test. Figure out how you're going to prepare, whether you're going to get a book, do a lot of practice questions yourself, or take a course, a classroom course or an online course. Remember, if you take an online course for the LSAT, you want to be doing virtually all your practice questions in pencil and paper. You're only online to learn techniques and stuff. You're doing your practice questions not on a screen, but on pencil and paper. So pick out the test you're taking, the 8-week period, the test you're taking, figure out what method you're going to use to prepare, and do it. Don't get involved in an avoidance cycle. And in fact, if you don't take a practice test within a week, you're already avoiding. So deal with yourself on that. So those would be my parting comments. Go for it. Do what you need to do. You know what that is. Get your best score.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jay, for all of your insight. Like I said before, everyone, please contact our office at scholarships@cobellscholar.org or contact Jay at jr@review.com. Unless someone has any pressing questions at the moment, I believe we can wrap up our webinar on the LSAT prep. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jay, for sitting in with us, and we will see you tomorrow for our GMAT and our MCAT sessions.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Good night, everybody.
Right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.